Hello, everyone. I'm Ellie from Nourishment Redacted, and welcome to Lioness Lifestyle Live. This is a show where we honor a keto, carnivore, meat-based woman. They share their experience, their healing journey to inspire and bring our community together.
And I am Cristie from Meeting Wellness, and it is so nice to meet with all of you as usual this evening. We have all been inspired by someone's story, and at Lioness Lifestyle Live, we believe that sharing stories is one of the best ways to help the people who are sick and without hope. And those of you that watch the show know that this is normally when Adrian would chime in, but Adrian is on a cruise, and our guest has not yet shown up. We're hoping she will pop in, but never fear. If not, we have a fun talk planned for you guys this evening. We hope you will join us in the chat for that and chime in. But before we get to that, I would like to put up this week's Roar of the Week. And here it is, short, sweet, simple, and to the point. It says replay with a bunch of exclamation points. Thank you to the Keto Rock Stars. We absolutely love our replay crew here at Lioness Lifestyle. And I would like to add that, hey, it is the replay crew that we choose the Roar of the Week from. So if you would like to be the next week's Roar of the Week, drop us a comment down below after the live show is over, and we will hunt through those and find someone to shout out on next week's show.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for bringing that comment up. I always love Roar of the Week. We are so thankful for all of our viewers live and replay. So, Cristie, let's talk a little bit about the past holiday that came up, which was Thanksgiving. Oh my gosh, a holiday about food. Right? For some people, it can be a tough kind of balancing act where you kind of have to, like, you know, figure out if you're going to partake in something that's off plan or you're going to, be strict and stay true to what you think is the best diet for you. So, why don't you start and tell us about your Thanksgiving?
Awesome. So yeah, before Thanksgiving, I definitely saw lots of videos of people kind of going over their plans, right? And some people were planning on just completely sticking to, whatever their lifestyle of choice is, whether that was carnivore, keto, whatever it was. Some carnivores were saying they were going to do more of a keto Thanksgiving, that kind of a thing. Some people were saying, hey, for that one day, they're going to eat whatever's on that Thanksgiving table, standard American style. And then go back to their lifestyle, the very next day with no further, like no keeping of the leftovers, right? Send everything with other people or get rid of it. So the temptation would not be there to eat it the next day. My plan last year was a lot scarier than this year. Last year was my first carnivore Thanksgiving. And so having, I would say, successfully navigated that, I was able to formulate a pretty good plan for this year. And so what I ended up doing, well, first of all, we have 2 Thanksgivings because we celebrate with my husband's side of the family, and then we celebrate with my side of the family. And that's because I have 2 brothers and we're all married. So there's just like way too many in-laws. We can't all come together. And I would love to continue the story another time because I just saw our guests pop up backstage. I'm so excited. Yay! So Ellie, can you go ahead and do the introductions and bring her
Absolutely. Yay. I have to get ready. Okay, so let's give a big round of cheer and happiness that Layla's here. Welcome to the show. Hello, hello.
Hello.
It is so nice to meet you.
It was so nice to meet you. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. We'd love to get to know you. Can you please share who you are, your health journey, and why you eat a carnivore diet?
Okay. So I am Layla Celis, and some of you guys may know me as the Dirty Carnivore. And I had a big journey when it came to why I became carnivore, but it primarily came with juvenile arthritis, and I was suffering for a very long period of my life. And then I got to be full strict carnivore, and my problems just minimized and ended up fading away.
Wow, that is fantastic. Can we dig a little more into that? I can't
Yeah.
imagine juvenile arthritis at all. I think I'm 49 now. I went carnivore at 48.
Hmm.
I think that I had maybe the beginnings of arthritis, like in my hand and my knee, but it was nothing major. I was a little worried about that developing because my grandmother had some pretty severe rheumatoid arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, uh-oh, I hope that isn't where this is going. But then going carnivore, whatever little symptoms, I had started to develop, for sure went away. But what is it like to have juvenile arthritis? I've never even had a student with that, and I've been a teacher for 25 years. So I'm curious to hear what that was like, what the symptoms were like, and then what your recovery was like.
Okay. Yeah, I could definitely share that. So I got diagnosed when I was 2 years old. So they say that it was like genetic arthritis from my dad's side. And at first, it wasn't so bad. It was just kind of something that I had. But then growing up, it slowly started to get worse during my childhood years. And by the age of 8 years old, I was on a ton of medication. I was like on 30 different meds, taking pills like morning, night, afternoon. And as a kid too, I would like experience lots of side effects just from the medication alone. I already had such severe pain by then, but also I ended up passing out from fainting, and I would get nausea, I would be vomiting, I'd be having all of these severe reactions, and nothing was working. And the only thing that the doctors would say is, oh, well, we don't know what's going on. By the age of 19, they would tell my mom she's going to be blind and in a wheelchair, and you're just going to have to accept that. That's just going to be her outcome. She's going to be disabled. That's it. We can't do anything about that. They just, their solutions was, oh, try this medication. Oh, that's not working. Mix this and that should work. Oh, that's not working. Mix this, that, and this. So it ended up becoming to a point where my mom was realizing that it wasn't working. The pharmaceutical, Western diet, all of that stuff was not working. And this was during a time where she was actually discovering spirituality and coming into yoga and all sorts of stuff. And she was transitioning away from just normal Western approach for things. My mom has always been very active in the health fields, and she's always loved kind of going outside of the box and outside of the norms and discovering new stuff. And at the time, she ended up taking me off of the medications, but we went vegan. So that was kind of like one of the first things is like, this is healthy. They say it's healthy. So let's try that. And he did that, but it became even worse. I ended up developing like anemia, and I got a lot of like deficiency in different types of nutrients, even though I was having everything that you should be like eating, consuming. We were taking superfoods. My mom was really big into like smoothies filled with superfoods and ashwagandha and maca and all sorts of things that they tell you that are amazing, hemp seeds and chia seeds. And we would have tinctures of many different herbs and things like that, and still nothing was working. So, and during at that time as well, my mom's ex-husband was also suicidal and had severe depression. So not only was she balancing a daughter that was like on the verge of being disabled, but then also dealing with that at the same time. So trying to find these cures for everybody in her family and everything. And as about like a week or so taking off all medications, I stopped walking completely. So I couldn't move. I lost all mobility in my hands, my neck, my knees, my feet, like everything. So I was literally like, my hands were completely crippled. I could not walk. I couldn't stand, and I couldn't turn my neck. So I had to turn my entire torso in order to look at anybody. And I was 9 when this happened. So at 9 years old, I was having all of these drastic things happen that usually people who are older experience loss of mobility and things, not someone who's 9, not a child. And during that time, we tried to find different types of remedies and things. That wasn't working. So the veganism wasn't working. We tried raw food for a bit. That wasn't working. And we ended up going to this kind of natural path. This was like a plant-based natural path. And he ended up suggesting basically continuing with the veganism, cutting out sugars and stuff, even natural ones. But he did this weird diet that still to this day haunts me, which was the grape diet, which was basically just eating grapes for an entire week and juicing grapes with the stems. And also having that. So I got sick of grapes as a kid. And then my mom would tell me, oh, because he would say every other week you would have to do this diet. And my mom's like, oh, remind me when we have to do the diet. I'd be like, and I would never remind her. I hated doing that diet. I did every single thing possible. And after that didn't work, we ended up, so we were living in Montreal at the time, moved back to Toronto where our family was. And my aunt was studying nutrition. And during that time, she knew like her mentor. He has like a bunch of credentials and things as well, but he doesn't like to be called naturopath, but he has knowledge in so many things. And one of the things that he ended up doing was, our first session was like a 3-hour session of just figuring out my entire life journey, from emotional to physical to any divorces that happen, any abuse that's happened that may have affected causing arthritis at such a young age. So he asked so many questions. We had to remember things that like we didn't even remember, surgeries and doctor appointments and all sorts of names of medications and all sorts of stuff. And during that time, I was 9 at the time. He ended up kind of explaining to me what leaky gut was at 9. And kind of like the first explanation that I ended up getting of that is that he kind of like drew little construction workers and said, okay, now this is your gut, and you have basically like a hole in your stomach. And he's like, and the construction workers are trying really hard to help you process all the food that's going in, but you can't absorb it because of that hole, and it's causing inflammation. So that's basically kind of like the simple way to explain to a kid what's going on. And he ended up taking like a blood tests and running different exams and stuff. And then I was on like a bunch of different kind of natural supplements and remedies, but he believed in something called like overdosing. And what he meant by that is that instead of taking like 2 vitamin C capsules, which would tell you the recommended dose, to take 4 instead. So I'd be taking everything in big doses in order for it to work faster and be more effective. And also he put me on the blood type diet, which is interesting because a lot of carnivores, even vegans, a lot of people like say that the blood type diet doesn't work and that there's not a lot of like evidence in regards to those stuff. But the funny thing is that that's what actually ended up helping me kind of recover. It's like I did blood type diet, but I wasn't even eating, like before that, I wasn't eating like processed foods and things. Like I was always that kid that liked to eat broccoli instead of cake. Like, so I never had issues with having like a sweet tooth or anything, or cutting out sugar was no problem for me. And they're like, oh, now you're going to cut out sugar and now you're just going to eat fruits, and then cut out the fruits and cut out. And so basically the main thing was putting back meat into the diet. And I think that that was a big one too. And I remember as a kid, he was like, "Oh, well, you know," he's like, you're O blood type, O negative. So they thrive on meat." And he said, "And you have all these issues and anemia and all that." And he's like, "We're going to have to put you back on that." But I was happy as a kid because one of my favorite foods growing up was always eating steak. I loved steak. Even going vegan, I was like, gonna miss that steak. So went back on that, ate basically just like steak and some vegetables, avoided certain nightshades, avoided some foods that didn't kind of sit well with me, didn't have like no sugar at all, no honey, no berries, nothing for those 3 years. And during that time, my mom was also doing a lot of like helping me do physiotherapy and doing Thai yoga massage, which is basically a practice from Thailand that is kind of like you're getting a massage but without moving. So like they're like moving for you. So you're getting a massage but while also getting a stretch at the same time. And since I didn't have any mobility, she would help me do these things. We did that. And also another thing that kind of helped with the journey, which is interesting, was cannabis. And at first, my mom was like absolutely against cannabis. And my uncle, he was a big stoner and he would grow his own plants and he would talk about the benefits of it all the time to my mom. And my mom was like, "I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to give my daughter that or anything like that." But my uncle accidentally left a pot of pot tea on the kitchen counter. And my mom came back from a yoga class and was like, "Would you like some tea?" And she gave me some tea. I drank it. And I was like, "This tea tastes so good. Can I have some more?" I was 10 years old when this happened. And she gave me more. And she gave me more. And I drank the whole pot of pot tea. And then about like 20 minutes later, I ended up feeling no pain. So I had no pain for like the first time in my life. And I've always struggled with severe crippling pain. If someone would simply just walk by me and accidentally nudge me, I'd start crying. Like it would be like so bad. The pain was like unbearable. And that was the first time that I had no pain. So at first my mom was confused, but then she kind of like put two and two together and she's like, "Oh my God, oh my daughter's high." And she got like, of course, like 10 years old, you know, that happening. And my uncle's like, "She'll be fine. Just, you know, like let her sleep, relax." And my mom ended up kind of starting to go deeper into herbalism then. So till this day, I'm a strong believer that I say that meat and animal products are food, but I believe plants to be medicine. They are not something that I think should be consumed all the time, every day. It's not good for us. But if we have things like some tinctures of even certain types of mushrooms or things that help us with our immune system for a short amount of time, that it could help. But having it every single day, and people are obsessed with superfoods and obsessed with all of these things that are just getting our immune system to a state where we're not supposed to have such a hyperactive immune system like that. And then that causes other issues. So I always tell people, I'm like, hey, I'm not against plants completely. I just think them to be more of like a medicinal aspect instead of it being the source of food. And time went by, and on Christmas, when I was 12, so that was 2011, I started walking again. So everyone's like, "It's a Christmas miracle. Oh my gosh, she's walking." Tears of joy and everything. And it took me a long time in order to kind of gain back full strength and mobility. And even to this day, like my arm doesn't fully extend straight. So I've tried everything, and I don't think it's ever going to come back fully into place because it's just the ligaments shortened is what happened. I have extended it throughout the years. In 2020 was when I was like basically exercising every single day, and I ended up slowly doing weight training is what helped it kind of extend again. But my feet, I still walk on my tiptoes, which a lot of people get confused by. Sometimes they look at me and they see, they're like, oh wait, she's like kind of walking on her tiptoes. Like, is that like intentional? But it's just what ended up happening is like my hips now, they're able to straighten, but if they straighten, my toes kind of curl upwards. So I end up walking on my tiptoes. So even though lots of things kind of went back to normal and into place, there are still some limitations. But what ended up happening is after a couple of years, I think around when I was 16, I started to get flare ups again. So every winter time, I would end up getting flare ups. And when I was 20, it got really bad one winter. And I had to basically start from scratch all over again. And that's what I ended up hating is that by October would come around, and I lived in Canada. So October would come around, it would get cold. I'd start to feel pain. By December, everything would be sore again. I would lose most of my mobility. Luckily, not to the point of not walking ever again, but everything would ache and I would have so much pain. And then I would have to do everything right, eat right, exercise, live life, and just hope for the best. And then by June, it would get better again. And then summertime, I would feel good. And then October, it would happen again. So it kind of ended up becoming a regular thing, like a yearly thing that I started to mentally prepare for. And I'm like, okay, like every single winter, I know that this is going to happen. And when I was 22 is when it got like some of it's like worse that I hadn't experienced in many years. And my mom ended up sending me a video of Michaela Peterson and her TED talk on carnivore and Lion diet. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do some more research on this and see what's up because I was doing everything right. And at the time, too, I was no longer doing blood type diet, no longer doing veganism, but I was exercising regularly. And basically, my food was just chicken, beef, greens, some berries. And I love to snack on hummus and tortilla chips. That was basically what I was eating. And I would have kimchi and things like that. And so I was like, okay, I'm not eating bad. I'm eating fairly good. Everything was organic, but still something was up. So did a deep dive, and then I ended up finding a video of Dr. Ken Berry, watched his explanation on the carnivore diet, and I was just like, you know what? Lion seems too strict for me at the moment. I'm like, let me just try to do just carnivore and see what happens. So in 2023, January 2023 is when I started carnivore. So almost 2 years ago. And about a month in, my knees from like being big balloons shrunk. And I was like, that's crazy. In 1 month, I had recovered basically it like 90% of it. Still, the inflammation was there, and I was kind of having a little bit of like fatigue. And I actually lost weight. I had lost weight before, but then going carnivore, I heard that you might lose weight in the beginning before kind of gaining it back. So I was also preparing for that. So my lowest when I started carnivore was 67 pounds. So I was 67 pounds. And I was and I never had issues with my body or body image, but looking at my body at that state and then seeing it be so frail and thin, but my joints being so big, I didn't like looking at myself in the mirror. I was like, you know what? I just need a not look at myself for a bit and just eat food, eat my meat and trust that it's going to get better, because I already had started to see the good after the 2 weeks. So the first, when I had the kind of like the keto flu, carnivore fever type thing going on, I got out of that pretty quick. But I did a lot of research beforehand as to what to do to avoid it. So now I actually kind of fast forward a little bit too. It's like when I help people go through carnivore, I tell them exactly what to get, what type of electrolytes, types of salt, types of things to avoid. If they're having diarrhea or if they're having constipation, like what elements to add or decrease or things like that. Which, even though I did a lot of research, I was like, okay, like I would love it if I had even more knowledge on that when I first started. So helping people through that transition, I always try to make it like it is kind of easy for them as possible. But about 6 months in, my skin was glowing. I had no acne, nothing. And I didn't have so much acne before, but I would always struggle with rosacea. Also had a lot of anxiety as a teenager and would have lots of anxiety attacks and things like that. And I ended up basically having had no anxiety for months. I was like, okay, no anxiety, skin is clear, libido is up, everything was going good. And I think around the 8-month mark is when it completely disappeared. It kind of like my joints went back to normal. And then I was worried because I was like, it's winter time, it's October. By the time when that happened, it was October. So I was like, okay, I guess like moment of truth. And I was documenting this on my carnivore page. I made that page as soon as I went carnivore to show the truths of it. I wanted to be as transparent as possible to anybody watching me and seeing my healing journey, but also anybody that was curious. And I had still a lot of family and friends that were vegan and were giving me backlash about it in the beginning. But I told them, listen, like I'm here posting everything. If something bad happens, you can say I told you so, and you can see the evidence because I'm literally documenting everything. So I started doing that. And I was also implementing a lot of kind of taboo topics and sexology. Since I was a teenager, I had been studying sexology. And I find that I already had a high libido. I never had an issue with that. But then after carnivore, it completely skyrocketed. So I was just like, you know what? Not a lot of people are talking about this. And I was like, I feel like I need to be talking about the more extreme things. That I've always been the black sheep. I've always been the outsider of every group, friendship, even in my family. Even though my family are black sheep, I am the black sheep of my family. So for me, I was like, you know what? I've never had like self-esteem issues. I've always had hate comments online with everything I've done. So I was not worried about getting more. So that's basically what ended up kind of spiraling the dirty carnivora. And kind of about like almost a year in, I started kind of implementing things into my diet again to see what would cause flare-ups and things. So I like it as a tool for elimination diet too, because I tell people a lot of times, I'm like, you don't have to be carnivore forever if you don't want to be. I'm just a huge meat advocate. I think that we need to eat meat. And I think that it's not healthy to be vegan, in my opinion. I'm like, okay, like cutting out the processed foods and all of that stuff, that's fine. You want to eat some greens, okay? But we need meat. And that's kind of the main thing that I get at is I'm like, if you eat more meat, if you eat more fats, if you eat more butter, you will be fine. Like there's guarantee that it's going to be helping and healing and fixing all sorts of issues. And it's just like, a lot of people my age, I'm 25, tell me like, oh, like I don't need to go carnivore. Or I don't need to go to these extremes and things like that. I'm young, you know, like I could eat junk food. I could eat this. I'm like, that's what all the the people at 25 said. But then when they're 50 and they start to have inflammation, back problems, and the men can't get it up anymore and all sorts of issues like that, they start to be like, okay, I need to make changes. You make changes halfway through your life when you're already having these issues, when we could easily have prevented those issues to begin with in the first place. And now, almost 2 years down the line, I started writing my book, which is coming out soon. It's probably coming out at the end of this month. It's called Meat Right for You, and it's all about my arthritis journey, and it goes into detail about everything I did and what worked and what didn't, and then kind of like an introduction to carnivore and a little carnivore challenge and some testimonials in there and stuff like that. So yeah.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. It's so funny because the moment you said juvenile arthritis, I was like,
Yeah.
where have I heard that before? And immediately Michaela appears to me because I feel like she's been so influential and so beneficial to everybody who is just like who is in crippling pain and has no hope. And that's why we have this show. We have stories like yours. And so thank you for sharing your experience. I was curious. So you had mentioned that when you first started the carnivore diet, you had lost so much weight. How long did it take you and what did you do to gain that weight back? Because a lot of people struggle sometimes either in one way or the other with their weight.
Yeah. So I ate a lot in the beginning of carnivore, and I kind of struggled with that kind of like appetite loss in the beginning, but I would try to eat in small kind of like I would divide my meals. So my family, they all came from background of like health and fitness, and my mom and dad being personal trainers and bodybuilders and all sorts of stuff. So I started to implement more of that approach, which is kind of like the bodybuilding method of eating every 3 hours. So I did that in the beginning a lot, is like just would kind of make small meals instead of big meals, or I would snack a lot. I hadn't eaten bacon in years, and it wasn't for anything in particular. Basically, it was I loved pigs. And I wanted to have a pig one day, and I was like, you know what? I can't eat bacon. I can't do it. But as soon as I went carnivore, I missed having like chips, and pork rinds and bacon is like the closest thing to that. And I remember I was at like my brother's house, and him and his girlfriend were cooking up some bacon, and then they're like, "You want some?" And I was like, yes. So I ate a lot of bacon in the beginning. I still to this day eat a lot of butter. I ate when I first started, I would eat like half a stick of butter a day. So I gained my weight through that, and I ended up gaining, I'd say, like 18 pounds on carnivore from like these past few years, which is crazy to me because I also like my body type and composition being ectomorph in the fitness kind of community, they call it, has a hard time gaining weight. I've always had an easy time gaining kind of like muscle and having like a lean body and six pack or whatever. Easy for me. But when it comes to gaining weight, I've always struggled with that. And I've always wanted to gain weight. So going carnivore, I ended up slowly starting to gain weight after upping my fats. So I tell people, I'm like, it really depends on your goals and things. I also eat a lot of dairy, which a lot of carnivores have mixed feelings about. And some people with autoimmune conditions can't have dairy. I've experimented with cutting it out, adding it in, nothing, no issues. I had to stop coffee in the beginning of the diet because I was having diarrhea. So I was literally like, this is not helping me at all. If I would even have one sip of coffee, I would feel like I'd have to run straight to the bathroom. And I'm like, I know coffee is a laxative, so I'm like, I'm going to steer clear from that for a bit. And when I implemented coffee back into my diet, till this day, coffee is my toxic boyfriend, is what I say. It's like my toxic relationship, because coffee to me is like, if I have it, I will get a little bit anxious. I feel a little bit of anxiety if I have coffee. I can't have as much of it as I used to have. Now, even if I have half a cup of coffee, I'm like, okay, that's like a lot for me. And so I had to switch to matcha, which I remember before going carnivore, I had that issue, but I was already going through a lot of anxiety and had a lot of stressful moments in my life. So when I switched to matcha, which has the compound L-theanine, which kind of gives you a gradual caffeine high, I ended up not having anxiety. So I remembered that, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to switch to that. And so still to this day, I have matcha, I have coffee, but I ended up implementing certain things, and I would eat berries. So after about a year of being carnivore, I started kind of like implementing some berries in the summertime. I wanted to stick to it being a seasonal thing to kind of, try to match the flow of life, as hippie as I am. That never went away. Even coming out of veganism, the hippie still stayed. Big into like the spirituality aspect and all of that. And I talk about it in my book of the fact that I think that eating right does amazing for you. But if your cortisol is high, if you are stressed, if you believe that you're never going to heal, you're never going to heal, even if you're doing everything right. And I think that the biggest thing for me in my healing was my mindset. I was always a positive person, and I was always like, I'm going to get through this. This arthritis isn't something that I have. It was never something that I used as an excuse or pitied myself for, or why me kind of thing. And whenever I'd fall victim to that mentality, I'd quickly snap out of it. I'd be like, no, like, we're not going there. And that is a hard thing to do. And a lot of people that have different types of illnesses make their illness their whole personality. They even introduce themselves with like, oh, like, I'm Natalie and I have anxiety and I eat stuff, it's like we're not telling our bodies otherwise. We're like, so that's the one thing that I kind of implemented during my healing journey, but also kind of also a big advocate towards.
I love that positive mindset. And before we move on, I want to pop this up here because here's Adrian saying hello. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, she's on a cruise and there isn't great Wi-Fi on cruises. She probably doesn't have the bandwidth to stream, but she's here with us in the chat. So hi, Adrian. We absolutely miss you. Anyways, I love your attitude and mindset. I struggle with maintaining a positive mindset and mentality. And so I really admire that you are able to do that, especially in the face of those types of circumstances with your arthritis. And Ellie had popped up a picture. I can't believe how big your knees were.
Yeah.
I mean, it hurts just looking at the picture, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, because you said that it was your mom that sent you the link or the video for Michaela Peterson. What about your mom? Because she was the one who took you into the vegan direction. Like, what about her allowed her to send you a carnivore video? How does she feel about it now? And the rest of your family, like, they've watched you do this now for almost 2 years. Have they changed their tune?
That's a great question. Well, so my mom, what I love about her, and I feel like we're similar in that sense, it could seem like people could either hate us or love us, in the sense where we kind of change our opinion on things really night and day. And my mom even more so than me. Sometimes she has an opinion on something and I'm like, I'm not going to take that fully, because I know tomorrow you're going to turn to it and tell me something else. And she's always been like that. But I think that that's a wonderful trait to have as well, because it allows for that growth. And I think that learning and unlearning is such a big part of life. We're taught so many things, but we have to have it kind of, we have to take everything with a grain of salt and kind of see, okay, like, why are people saying this? Like, why is this good? And the more you do research, the more you start to have those kind of answers. And the thing is, a lot of people don't do research. They do trust their doctor or their naturopath or whatever to tell them what is good for them, instead of tuning in and listening to their body and seeing what's good for them. And that's a thing, is like, in society, I find that we're lost with being in tune with how we feel and when we're sick and when something is wrong. Even having, like, waking up and you're like, oh, like, I have a stiff neck. People just brush that off as like, oh, it's my body, that's, I'm getting older, that's just how it is. Instead of seeing that maybe that's a sign of something. Maybe you slept wrong, could be. Maybe you drank alcohol the night before and now you're having aches and pains, could be. It's like all of these things that people don't pay attention to. And I think that I got very sensitive when it came to my arthritis, to know any little drastic changes that I did, like any little change I would immediately feel it drastically. And my mom, she has always been in the health field, but also doing martial arts, and she's Brazilian, so she did a lot of like jiu-jitsu and judo and capoeira, and she's very like a big tomboy, and I am too. And she's always been the black sheep of her family, kind of going outside of those norms, and even kind of not going through the traditional route of having a normal job and having like being a yoga teacher and all sorts of stuff. People are like, that's not stable, like that's not gonna. And I'm like that as well, like with my creative endeavors and all sorts of stuff. It's like we value the freedom more and the knowledge more than that stability. Does it come with a cost? Yes, it definitely does. But everything in life is just like, it's a choice. And when my mom took me off of like veganism, she went off of veganism too. She was like, I'm gonna go off of this too. My siblings as well. And when I stopped walking, she also took us out of school. So she was like, oh, I'm going to do like the homeschooling approach. But during that time too, she also didn't like how the school system was and the curriculum. So she was like, I'm going to do unschooling. So a lot of people in the family were already kind of against her. A lot of extended family, mostly, being like, oh, you're killing your daughter. You're taking her off of these medications. Now she can't walk. What are you going to do? How do you know you're doing the right thing? And she had to just trust in her, her motherly women intuition that she was doing the right thing, even though she didn't know if she was or not. She read a lot of information, like did the best she could, and reading books and going to seminars and workshops and all sorts of stuff like that. And she had no idea. She had no clue. She would just have to like find out, kind of thing. And so when we stopped that and stopped school and all sorts of stuff, we were already kind of like the weirdos of the family, we were already the black sheep of the family. And my mom, when we were vegan and raw food and all that stuff, she'd be like the weird mom that would like come to the parties and like wouldn't allow us to like eat cake, and would bring us like pack us food and things like that. So a lot of people are like, wow, like, this is too extreme for me. Like, this is too drastic. And then eventually again being drastic, being like, we're gonna eat meat again. People are like, whoa, like she's nuts. She must be crazy. Is this going like from this to that to this to that? And eventually, well, my mom was always big into like health and healing and spirituality and also psychedelics. And one thing was ayahuasca. It was like a big healing plant that I ended up taking during my during my teenage years. But the first time I took it was even at the age of 10. And I had like a small dose. In Brazil, in the Amazon, they do that. They a lot of tribes do that because they say that ayahuasca is the most powerful antioxidant in the world, and it's helped heal a lot of people's mental and physical disabilities. So we experimented with everything, done everything. And like I said, still to this day, it's like my mom ended up she sees me now as her kind of like she calls me her nerd because now I do the research. Now my mom, she just sends me one video and I will research the hell out of it. I will watch 20 videos, read articles, read what the vegans are saying about it, what the carnivores are saying, and make my own conclusion, and then give my mom like 20 plus information back. So she gives me one video and I'll give it. So, and she loves that. She's like, wow, I don't need to do research anymore. She's like, now you're doing it for me. So, and that was how it was with the carnivore diet. Is she was just like, how about you try it, see if it works. If it works, we'll all go carnivore. So her and her husband went. My siblings, they kind of eat whatever they want. They're still not at that stage where they care much about it, but they eat a lot more meat now than before. So we're like, okay, you know what, baby steps. So yeah. And my mom is more animal based than carnivore. And for me now, I'm still carnivore, but I do sometimes implement like fermented foods. And during the holiday season, I have more of like a Ken Berry approach, going a little bit keto. And sometimes now I'm with my like boyfriend and his family for the holidays, and they're like, what could she eat? You know, and I'm like, I'll eat all the meat. Like they're Italian, so they're gonna do seafood. I'm like, I'll eat the seafood, you know, but I'm not gonna say no to some alcohol. I'm not gonna say no to like a slice of pie. You know, I'm not like so strict like that to where like it completely affects me, but I will notice it in even if I have like a drink, the next day I will notice being a little bit more tired or a little bit more stiff. That will be how it starts. So for me, I never like to overdo it on anything. I know my limits and I know what affects me and what doesn't. And even with the kind of with I remember the beginning of this year, I had went to a party, drank too much, and my sister was making oatmeal. And I was like, you know what? Let me try a spoon of that. I tried a spoon of oatmeal, and for the next 2 weeks, my body was sore. And I was like, never again am I going to do that. So I know the things that affect me to that extent, which I don't even touch at all. And for me, it's like any like hard carbs, any rice and pasta and oats. I know that that's just a no for me. I don't really do processed foods or anything, but occasionally I do still like to eat chocolate every now and then. So I always try to find it from the cleanest source possible and all of that. So I tell people, I'm like, you know what? Like I did it for such a long period of time that for me now, like a lot of people have kind of mixed feelings about it, but again, I share it on my page and talk about it all the time. I'm like, nobody is removing your carnivore card if you decide once a week that you want to have some guacamole with your pounds and pounds of meat that you're eating. You know, it's just like, so it really depends on the person and all that. I know some people have it like very severe where they can't even touch any of that, none of that. But for me, I know exactly kind of like what works for me. And that's basically what I've been doing.
You know, I really appreciate how you were raised by a mother who was open-minded enough to be able to um, kind of go against the status quo. And I think that takes a lot of strength And it also takes a lot of like, I don't know, you have to believe in yourself and you have to feel good enough to be able to stand up to those who go against you. And so I find that you must be very thankful for your mother and very like, you know, it's like you have this great role model, even if you accidentally had weed tea at 10 years old, which is, that was the funniest story I think I've heard on the show so far. So for you, you basically, as a young kid, a child, you were in a wheelchair, you couldn't walk, you could barely move your like limbs, and now you're, you know, this bright, vivacious woman who's able to like go after her dreams, and obviously you're very passionate about this and very well spoken. It's like, what would you say to those who are feeling like maybe carnivore is too extreme for me or something that I can't do? What would you say to them to inspire them and to get them to try it?
Well, it's interesting because I think in about in April or so, I decided to experiment with making a carnivore course. So I kind of wanted to make like a 3-month program and things like that, which I still have. And probably next year, I'm going to kind of fully launch that course. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to take 10 people and give it to them for free. So whoever were the 10 people that responded to my story were to get the program. We had a group on WhatsApp, and I would make individual programs for them depending on what they wanted, whether it was autoimmune, gaining weight, losing weight. One of my exes, when I first started going carnivore, he was like 280 pounds, and I put him on carnivore, and he lost 10 pounds every single month. And one of the biggest things that I was saying was like dairy is a lot of people kind of if their goal is to lose weight, I suggest not having that much dairy. Dairy is one of those things that I find is good for people who want to gain weight. And if you want to have a snack here and there or use it as a condiment, I know like Anthony Chaffee says that using it as a condiment is the greatest thing, you know, like just having a side of sour cream or something like that. But again, people overdo it with everything. For me, as for someone who is trying to gain weight, I implement as much dairy with my meals. You know, I'll have a slice of cheese with my meat, you know, lots of butter and things like that. But when it comes to kind of the extremities, a lot of people didn't end up fully sticking to it. And a lot of people kind of felt that shame with that. Like later on they would message me and they're like, oh, like I kind of broke my diet and I fell off and I want to try it again or whatever. And I would tell them like, again, it's like, it's fine. We're not perfect. You know, nobody is perfect. We're going to make mistakes and it's going to continue to happen. Like, there's some people that like simply cannot afford to make those mistakes. They know that if they eat one thing the next day, they will be screwed for, you know, for months even. So, yeah. And a lot of people, after I'd say give it 2 months. I always tell people, give carnivore 2 months, be strict for 2 months. 2 months is nothing. You know, it goes by so quick. And then slowly start to implement foods back into your diet if that's what you want to do. You know, eat a lot of meat. I have one of my best friends, his name is Scott. I got him to do my course. I said, like, listen, I was like, I need you to be my guinea pig. I was like, tell me your goals, tell me what you want, you know, if you want to gain weight, gain muscle, whatever. And I was like, I'll help you. And he's also an ectomorph like myself, so he's always struggled with that, like the gaining weight process of things. So I told him, okay, you know, we're gonna do dairy, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. And he stuck with it for like 2 months and then ended up messaging me like, oh, I was on a road trip and, you know, like I fell off and I had some fries with my family and things. I was like, that's fine. That's okay. Like, here and there, it's okay. It's just like to not make a habit out of it. And that's the thing. It's like, I think that not everybody can go strict carnivore, but animal-based is better than nothing. Just getting the, like, avoiding refined carbohydrates, avoiding sugar, avoiding processed foods, and just eating a lot more meat. My boyfriend is more animal-based. He likes to eat his salads, but he eats meat every day, all the time. So I tell him, like, okay, you want your I make jokes because a lot of people call me oxalate queen because I drink matcha. So all of my carnivore friends say, oh, the oxalate queen is back at it again. So now I call him oxalate king. I'm like, okay, yo, I was like, I found my oxalate king. So yeah, I honestly, it's like, it really depends on the person and their goals and things like that. But we can't afford, like, a lot of people think that they can afford to eat the way they do now, and it's never worth it. It's never worth it.
Yeah, I want to like cut that little snip you just said about the processed food and the sugar and just like broadcast it to all my students, because I'm telling you, if I go in there in the morning, like before school, some weeks we have like before school, duty where we have to watch the kids, and they're not supposed to eat, but they are always trying to sneak in food, and it's always candy and like chips and Gatorade. And I'm like, what are you doing? And then what the school is going to feed them for breakfast? It's going to be, some kind of cereal and non-fat milk. Or chocolate milk. And then for lunch, it's like a little, if there's any meat at all, it's like a little, burger patty this big with a giant bun and a bunch of other processed stuff. And so I feel like that's most of their diet. So if people can get rid of that list of stuff you just said, I think they will be leaps and bounds
100%
better. I wanted to ask you, what is your diet like now? Like, give us like a typical day, and then what foods have you added back in? Because you said you've been experimenting with that. So what works for you to add back in, and what have you been like, nope, can't do it?
So, one thing I wanted to add too is like two things actually about like the diet and things is like, Anthony Chafee talks about coffee, and he says like no coffee. And my mom struggled with kind of like knee pain for basically her entire 40s, and she was eating animal based, eating a lot of meat, and she's like, I don't know, she's like, everything has been working perfectly fine. She's like, but I still have this knee pain. And I was like, cut the coffee to see what happens. And a week later it went away. 1 week later, and she never had that pain again. And now she's not even able to have like coffee. If she has coffee, she also has anxiety as well. She'll have like a sip and she can already start to feel her knee. She already starts to get anxious. So again, it's like seeing what works for you is very important in that sense, listening to your body. But sometimes that could take a long time in order to learn. And it's funny because my boyfriend's dad is a vegan. And we get into debates all the time about things. All the time. He messages me, sends me a link of, of like an animal like being slaughtered or something. And I'm like, I sent him links about like the agriculture system and how that's killing, thousands and hundreds of animals and insects and things. And I'm like, we can go at this all day, like it's not going to change. One thing so a couple things I implemented back in were sauerkraut, kimchi. So I have sauerkraut weekly, I'd say. While I've been here, I've been having some avocado, like some guac. And that's basically kind of like to like a weekly extent, I'd say, besides all the meat, or those are the things that I kind of implement back in. But in the winter time, I find myself craving a little bit more grounding foods. And one of the things that I like to eat here and there are sweet potatoes and plantains. Sweet potatoes and plantains have like no effect on me. And I wonder too if there's such a thing as kind of like uh eating for ancestry as well, because I've had a lot of different friends and things that have done research on eating based on genetics and like biology, ancestry, and all that stuff, and that uh some people in Asia can process certain things better than people in Africa, than people in South America, and all sorts of stuff like that. And that's why I'm such a kind of like also an advocate for, if you do want to eat those things, if you do want to eat other stuff, to eat it seasonally. So if you're in North America, like eating pineapple in the winter time is just like, for me, it's like I don't find that to be kind of like, one, it's like sustainable and all that stuff, but two, it's like our body in the winter time, especially if you're living in a cold place, is trying to pack on the fat, is trying to hibernate, is like, is trying to have that like survival type mode. So I and it's funny because I've talked to other friends of mine who were previously like very strict carnivore, who've become a little bit more animal based, and it's the same with them, is that they find that in the winter time that they crave certain things. So mostly I eat a lot of eggs. I eat a ton of eggs. So my day mostly consists of from like 4 to 12 eggs a day. And then I'll have a quarter to half a stick of butter a day. And I'll have that with my meals. Sometimes I'll like munch on it. Like if I'm really hungry, or if I like fasted, I also do a lot of like, so I do fasting depending on where I am on my cycle. So when I'm on the luteal or period, I do not fast. I always tell all of my like women clients, I'm like, that's not the best time to be fasting, to be doing extreme things, to be heavily exercising, to be doing cold plunges, all sorts of stuff. I think that's the period literally of rest. It should be of rest. It should be like light stretches, even with eating and things like that. A lot more fats and stuff. But besides that, after my period, for the next 2 weeks, then I will mostly fast, and I would have like one meal and one snack at night. So that's basically what I do, is meat, a side of sauerkraut, some cheese, butter, and then my boyfriend and I have been are kind of like, we meal prep throughout the whole week, so we kind of eat basically the same thing, whether it's like ground beef and a little bit of sauerkraut on the side. But on the weekends is when we kind of have different things. So we'll like we're gonna do a wings night, or we're gonna do some seafood, or he used to work at a seafood restaurant, so sometimes I get spoiled and he makes some salmon and oysters and all sorts of stuff like that. So honestly, it's like, a lot of people say too, carnivore is boring, and I think that it's far from it. I think that with the variety of different cuts and of meat and textures and all sorts of stuff, that there's just so much to go around. It's like, it's your choice if you want to add back sweet potatoes, but you don't have to add sweet potatoes. And then that's what I tell people, is just like, if you want to eat for satiation and for health, meat. If you want to have a little something else, or you feel like, you're like, oh, I want to eat meat, but I want to have, I don't know, tomatoes on the side. You don't need the tomatoes. but you can have the tomatoes here and there.
Awesome, fantastic. Yeah, I also like that approach of where you decide to go on, the carnivore diet as an elimination diet, and then you ultimately are finding the diet that works best for you, which I think is really important. And I think it's great that your boyfriend is supportive of you, because I think when you do live a lifestyle, like I said earlier, that is against the status quo, it's really important to have those around you that are just supportive and make you feel safe and make you feel like you are doing good for yourself. Because everyone can be so negative sometimes. So I really appreciate that. We are at the end of the show, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. Before you go, we'd like to end the show with a roar. So if you would be willing, we like to count down 3, 2, 1, and then we all roar because we're lionesses on the show. Would that be fun?
Sure. Why not?
I think you would be open-minded to do that. Okay, so I want everybody in the comments to please write roar so we can pop you up on the screen. And if you're watching the replay, we love our replay crew. You're actually one of the roar of the weeks today, which is awesome. Please write roar in the comments so we can thank you for sticking with us to the end of the episode. So if we're ready, I'll start counting. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Roar!
Yes.
Okay.
Look at Aaron. Aaron was quick with the roar this evening. Thank you, Aaron. Josephine, that's a good one. She's on it.
It's like I'm with the chefs. Appreciate that.
I wonder if Eric is here. Oh, thanks, Michael. Thanks, Diane.
That's awesome.
Karen. Hi, Karen. I didn't see you all night.
She came in early because her time was
okay.
wrong. So
my
that
time
she's
was
stuck with us.
Hi, Karen.
There
she
our
is,
lovely
Adrian.
So glad you were able to watch.
Pixel is back there. There is a Pixel sighting for those of you that haven't gotten to see her recently.
Pixel sighting.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, everyone. From all of us here at Lioness Lifestyle Live, thanks for catching another episode with us. We'll be back here 1 week from tonight it'll be our final live episode, I believe, of 2024. We do have some things planned for the week of Christmas Eve and the week of New Year's Eve, so stay tuned for that. We'll not leave you high and dry, but this will be our last live show of the year. We've got some great guests, though, lined up for January, so get ready for that. So we'll be here live with you next week with another awesome guest, and we will see you then. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching.